Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for the international webinar. Today, we are going to be covering navigating the sports scholarship process, common questions and best practices for international students. For those joining us live today, your microphones and cameras will be turned off, so please use the Q&A feature to put down any questions that you have that you would like to ask us today. Please be sure to include your email address. Any questions that we cannot get to during today's webinar, we will have our customer service team follow up with you. And with that, let's get started. Today's agenda will cover a few new things that we would like you to learn about the NCAA Eligibility Center process and navigating being recruited to an NCAA school. We will first take a look at staying on track, so step by step what you need to know about what this process looks like. We'll take a dive quickly into registration and give you some resources on how to register with the NCAA. Then we're going to talk about how to be recruited. That's one of the most common questions that international student athletes ask about how to start this process, how to get recruited. We're going to touch on some of the academic and amateurism requirements for our NCAA member schools. Then we're going to take a look at the student visa process and best practices. And then we will follow up with some resources and a deeper dive for you into a Division 1 and 2 worksheet, some of our country-specific web pages that we have available for you, how to navigate which international course titles from your transcripts can be used, what are the credit values for those course titles, and then some additional resources for you to use after today's webinar. At the end, we will follow up with a question and answer period and then provide you with our contact information if you have any additional questions after watching today's webinar. And with that, let's get started. First, let's talk about staying on track with the Eligibility Center and the eligibility process. This is a really great visual that helps walk you through everything that you should keep on track with throughout navigating the process of looking for and attending an NCAA school. So you'll see step 1 at the beginning of that track is the NCAA Eligibility Center, or what you see there as EC for Eligibility Center. Step 1 right off the blocks is to register with the NCAA Eligibility Center. If you are looking at this resource afterwards, we will be sending a recording out as well as a PDF, and all of the blue hyperlinks that you see on this visual are able for you to click on to get more information about those steps in the process. So first one is to register with the NCAA Eligibility Center. You can start with our free profile page. There's no cost associated with that, and we'll talk more about the registration process in just a moment. Once you register, it's important to plan on what core courses that you are taking in secondary school, and we will talk about what is an NCAA core course, how many of those that you need to complete in order to be eligible to compete for and receive a scholarship at the Division 1 or 2 level. Next in the process is if you become recruited by an NCAA school, you can then transition that free profile page over to our certification account. We'll have some resources that help walk you through transitioning your account. The next process would be getting recruited. So what does that look like when coaches start to reach out to you? How can you promote yourself? We're going to talk about all of that today. The next step in the process would be working with your secondary school and asking your school counselor or representative at your school to submit your transcripts and/or translations to the NCAA Eligibility Center. We will have a resource in this presentation today that will take you to all of the information on how to submit your academic records to the NCAA Eligibility Center. The next step in the process would be to apply and be admitted to those NCAA schools that you're interested in. So that is a separate process from NCAA eligibility. You must also apply to the school you're interested in and be accepted by their international admissions office. One thing that's optional but not required is that you may be offered what's called a national letter of intent by that NCAA school. It's not required to sign with a school, but that is an agreement that you can sign between you and that school, which commits you to that college or university for 1 academic year, so long as you are eligible to compete, receive aid, etc. for that school. You can find more information on the NLI National Letter of Intent program on our website. The next step would be in the spring or April time period before you enroll at an NCAA school, or if you're enrolling mid-year, that would be an October timeframe. You would need to request final amateurism. So for many people today, the word amateurism might be something new to you. That is the idea that you are not a professional in your sport, but an amateur. And so you can find more information on the amateurism or sports participation section of your account on our website, but you must complete a sports information section on your NCAA account, and then you will be able to sign off on that saying that all information is complete, which sends it over to the staff at the NCAA to review and then certify you as an amateur in your sport. And while we're moving along this track, each piece of the way, we're also wanting to make sure that you're staying on track with those 16 core course credits. Again, we're going to talk on an upcoming slide about the academic requirements, but each way through secondary school, year 9, year 10, 11, and so forth, you should be making sure that you're completing core courses each year. So things such as English, native language, mathematics, sciences, social sciences, etc., to make sure that by the time you graduate secondary school, which is step 9 you see there, that you've met the academic requirements and completed the number of core courses that you need, as well as earning the grade point average needed in order to be eligible to receive a scholarship and compete for an NCAA school. So step 10 then would be once you graduate or upon graduation, having your school or exam board submit that proof of graduation or exam results or diploma to the NCAA Eligibility Center. For all documents issued in a language other than English, we do require a line-by-line English translation. So you want to make sure all of those documents are submitted and submitted in a timely manner so that you can be certified by the NCAA Eligibility Center. That step is required in order for you to receive your I-20, which is the form that you need to have an embassy or visa appointment. We'll talk more about that in upcoming slides. So once you receive your I-20 from the NCAA school that you have applied to and been accepted, you would then set your embassy or visa appointment with the embassy or consulate in your local city or nearby city. And once you have gone through that visa interview process, then you will hopefully receive your F1 visa, which is what you need to travel. And then the final stage crossing the line there is to arrive to the NCAA school in which you wish to compete for. So let's talk about that registration process. Registration is required. You can register as young as 9th grade or grade 9 in your country. Again, we recommend starting with that free profile page, but it is not a requirement. If you would like more information on the registration process, here is a great registration checklist. So you can get your smartphone out, scan that QR code, and that will help walk you through which account type you need and which is right for you. For those of us that might not be watching or joining live today, just know that you will also be able to click on the link there. And for those of us who are joining us live, we will be throwing these links to these resources in the chat as well. So take a look over there. A few additional resources to help you navigate the registration process. We have some really great tutorials on our YouTube channel, so I would recommend scanning either of these QR codes. The links will also be put in the chat to these for more information on 3 different account types that we offer, as well as more information again on how to transition, if you have that profile page, how to transition that profile page over to the certification account type, which is needed for Division I and Division II eligibility. Okay, so let's talk about how to be recruited and some best practices for you to remember in this process. One of the most frequent questions that we receive from international students is, how do I apply for a sports scholarship? And that's a great question because that is the most important thing that we can kind of stress to you in the recruiting process when navigating this new space of NCAA eligibility, is that this is actually not an application process. So you do not apply for a sports scholarship. How it works is that the coaches of the programs at our NCAA member schools are actually actually the ones doing the recruiting for those programs. So we're going to talk about a few best practices and things that you can do to show your interest to those coaches, but the coaches are actually the ones recruiting for their teams and the different positions that are needed, and they would offer you a scholarship to come play for their school and compete on your team. That scholarship is pending your eligibility, which again is why you register with the NCAA Eligibility Center to be deemed eligible to receive that scholarship. So how do you go about showing your interest to those coaches or programs? We're going to talk about how to reach out and email NCAA coaches, how to market yourself. I would suggest creating a sports resume that has information on your accomplishments within your sport, your position, statistics about you, and we'll talk in just a moment about some suggestions for that. If you financially are able to or have opportunities to attend camps and showcases where you know that NCAA coaches will be in attendance, we would also encourage that as well. That's a way for you to get in front of coaches so that they can see your performance and see your interest in attending an NCAA school. It's also important to know when NCAA coaches can recruit you, and we will talk about that next. So this is a link here, which will also be dropped in the chat, which is our website on.ncaa.com/recruitcal. So NCAA Division I and II recruiting calendars talk about per sport what time of year coaches can come and watch you in an evaluation period, when they're allowed to reach out or have a discussion with you in the recruiting process. So if you don't hear back from a coach that you've reached out to, it's not necessarily that they are not interested in you. It just may be a time of year in which they are not allowed to actively recruit for their sport. So it's important to just educate yourself on the sport that you're interested in as to what those recruiting calendars are and when and how coaches can recruit you. Most oftentimes in those sports, coaches cannot begin to actively recruit you until the summer after grade 10 or year 10 in schooling. But for more information, just be sure to visit our website for details on those recruiting calendars. So let's talk about step-by-step a few tips of what you should do when contacting NCAA coaches. What I would suggest to do is visit the website of the school that you're interested in attending. So if you're interested in attending Elizabeth University, you would go to Elizabeth University's website. You would look for the tab that directs you to their athletics department. Within the athletics department page, you should be able to find a sport and/or staff directory. When you click on that, it should break down the staff by sport to where you can then view the names and email addresses of the coaches in which you are interested in playing that sport. So if you're interested in playing tennis for Elizabeth University, you would go to the athletic department page, click on the staff directory, look for a list of the tennis coaches' names and email addresses. I always suggest start by emailing assistant coaches or position coaches. The reason that we suggest that is that head coaches are very busy running those programs, and oftentimes their assistant coaches or position coaches are the ones fielding those initial interest emails and kind of looking through those inquiries to see which student athletes or which athletes may be a best fit for their program. What should you include in the email once you've identified the names or email addresses of those assistant coaches or position coaches? So again, I mentioned a sports resume, or what some of you may know as a sports CV. Those are information that breaks down about you and your sport. A few things that we suggest to include within a sports resume or sports CV would be your name. Once you've registered with the NCAA, you will be assigned a 10-digit NCAA ID number. We strongly suggest including that in that sports resume or email that you send to those coaches so that they can identify you in the NCAA system and actively recruit you. List what position you're playing, what height, weight, wingspan, etc. Any other physical statistics that are prevalent to your sport, you would want to include that in your email or resume. what class you are. So if you are graduating in 2025 and plan to enroll in the fall of 2025, you would be considered class of 2025. So it's important to tell those coaches which class you are or believe that you wish to be. Include your grade point average. And we're going to go over today how to calculate your NCAA grade point average and some resources for you to figure that out. But you're welcome to include your overall GPA as well as your NCAA GPA. Be sure to list any teams or clubs that you've played for. If you've received any awards or achievements, you can list those as well, such as team captain or any accolades there. And then include any links to YouTube videos showing your performance. For individual sports such as swimming, tennis, etc., you can include, or track and field, you can include the events that you compete in, the times for those events that you have achieved, what performance, statistics, rankings, if applicable. Even if you are not ranked internationally, if you have played against notably ranked individuals, win or lose, you could include those statistics and how you competed or leveled against those ranked players. That helps give coaches an idea of where your performance is as well. We would also suggest customizing each email to include the coach's name, the name of their school, and what you like about their program. This will give you a better opportunity for coaches to respond when they see that you've put in the time and the effort to create that email and that interest to them versus if you were to just draft an email and send it out to 20 or 30 coaches, they're seeing that there may not be as much interest in that you're just mass emailing. So it's very important for you to take the time to customize those emails of interest to those coaches and their programs to show that you genuinely are interested in their program. For more information on researching the NCAA schools, we have a really great interactive map. Again, the link to this map will be put in the chat for you to click on. If you're watching this after today's live interaction, in the recording, you can click on this for more information on the NCAA map and selecting one of our almost 1,100 colleges and universities. Okay, so now we're going to briefly touch on the NCAA initial eligibility requirements and give you some resources. It's very important to know that there are 3 different requirements that you should track on in order to be able to play sports at an NCAA school. So the first requirements that you should track on and that are important are making sure that you know what you need to do to graduate secondary school from your school or country. That is first and foremost, most important is graduation. From there, you will then want to make sure that you're tracking on what NCAA initial eligibility requirements are, which are those requirements to compete in your first year at an NCAA school. And then third, you also want to do your research to the schools that you are interested in attending to find out what the admissions process looks like and what the admissions requirements are. Each of these requirements will likely differ from one another, so it's very important that you're making sure that you know what you need to do to graduate secondary school, what you need to do to be eligible for your scholarship, and what you need to do to be admitted to the school. For more information on NCAA initial eligibility requirements, you can scan the QR code here or look at the link dropped in the chat, which goes over the initial eligibility requirements for international students for Division I and Division II. Division I core course requirements requires 16 core course credits in the areas you see on the screen here and a grade point average of a 2.3 or higher on a 4.0 grading scale. You can find information in your country-specific PDF, which we will go through in the resources section, that tells you how to calculate your country's grade point average into that US 4.0 grading scale. Core course areas include subjects that fall within English, native language, mathematics, sciences, so natural or physical sciences such as biology, chemistry, physics, etc. 1 additional credit of an English, math, or science. Social sciences, 2 credits, and then any other, which would be considered world languages, comparative religion, or philosophy courses. A great example I like to use for international students is if you have studied both English and native language for 4 years, so year 9, 10, 11, and 12, those courses would be worth 1 credit unit each in that subject area. So that means that total you would have 8 credits of English and native language. We could use the 4 best grades towards the English native language bucket that you see as the first bucket there, and then we could use the additional 4 credits in the other bucket that you see at the bottom. In the resource and presentation today, we're going to go over what subjects and how to determine if a subject on your transcript is a core course or not, and then the credit value of each of those courses to make sure that you're totaling the requirements. So an example I like to use is that a natural or physical science course would be worth a half a credit for the year. So that means that you would actually need to study 4 of the sciences in order to get you to the total of 2 credits. Next, we're going to talk about Division II core course requirements. I always tell student athletes that if you aim for Division I eligibility, by default, you will also meet Division II eligibility because the requirements are so similarly aligned. So you'll see the subject areas like we just spoke about listed in the 6 buckets there, and then the GPA is just slightly different. So if you remember, Division I required a 2.3 GPA on a 4.0 scale. Division II requires a 2.2 GPA or higher on that 4.0 grading scale. Division III. So you may wonder why we were focused on Division I and Division II for those last 2 slides. That's because Division III schools determine their own academic requirements. Those are not requirements that are certified by the NCAA Eligibility Center. So you would want to work with the Division III school to find out what their academic requirements are for eligibility at their school or campus, what their admissions process is like, and what financial aid opportunities are there. Part of the reason for that is because Division III schools do not offer sports scholarships. All of their scholarships are academic or merit-based scholarships, but they have many Division III schools. Division III is actually our largest division, so I would encourage you to do your research on a Division III school and see what scholarship opportunities they might have available for you. All international students who plan to compete at a Division III college or university must complete an NCAA Eligibility Center amateurism only certification account. You can find this account type on our resource that we provided you previously on the registrations. We will also drop that into the chat for you as well. And then if we had any domestic students who plan to compete at a Division III school, they could register for the free profile page. But today we're talking to you, the international prospective student athletes. And then just remember, for a more in-depth overview of the academic requirements and what you need to do to be eligible to compete for any of our Division I, II, or III schools, be sure to scan this QR code, as well as our staff will be dropping a link into the chat to our November 2023 webinar, which goes into detail on the academic requirements as well as the amateurism requirements for each division. So be sure to check out that webinar on our YouTube channel. One of the most important things that we are going to cover today is just a reminder about document submission. So in order for us to determine whether you meet those academic requirements, that means we have to review your transcripts from years 9 and up, any diplomas, exam results, leaving certificates, etc. So scan this QR code, and we'll also drop a link into the chat for this information to learn about how to submit your official academic records to the NCAA Eligibility Center. Okay, let's talk about the F1 student visa process. So international students would come to study in the United States on what's called an F1 student visa. Here are the step-by-step reminders for you as you prepare to get your student visa to come study and compete for an NCAA school. Step 1 is to be certified as eligible by the NCAA Eligibility Center. Once you have registered, submitted your documents, those have been reviewed, and you have been certified as eligible, the next step is that the school that you applied to and were admitted to will then issue you what's called a Form I-20. This is the form that you need in order to schedule a visa appointment at your local embassy or consulate. Be sure to track on and be aware of the wait times at consulates and embassies. They can often be very long, but they do typically give priority to students seeking F1 student visas to come to the United States. So best practices for your F1 student visa interview. The number one reason why F1 student visas are denied is typically because students are not prepared for their interview process. So here are a few best practices that we recommend to help you prepare for that interview. So make sure that you do your research ahead of your interview. They will let you know what documents that you need to bring to your visa interview appointment. Make sure that you have all of those required documents with you for your appointment. Be sure to dress professionally, be open and honest and consistent in the interview process. Do your homework and your research on the U.S. school that you plan to attend. Know where the school is located, what state within the United States that it's located in, what part of the country. Be sure to practice your English if necessary so that you feel prepared and understand the questions that are being asked to you and can properly respond to those questions. Be sure to demonstrate your interest in that school or the program in which you have a desire to study. So if you know that you want to study business administration or sports programming or whatever subject areas that you want to study your degree in, make sure that you do some research to know if that program is offered at that school so that you know why you selected that school and that you can discuss that in the visa interview process. And then also be sure to show your intent to return to your home country after graduation. Another reason that we hear for visa denials is what's called non-immigrant intent, making sure that you have proper ties to your home country to show your intent to return home after graduation. So what's next after the interview process? Well, hopefully if that all goes well, you would then be issued your F1 student visa by the embassy or consulate. This will then allow you to travel to the US to attend the NCAA school that you applied and were admitted to, who issued you that I-20 form. For more information on the F1 student visa process, I would suggest visiting travel.state.gov for more information. You can also contact the compliance officer in the athletic department of the NCAA school to recruiting you for any additional school-specific questions you have related to an F1 student visa. But also be sure to speak to your school about the do's and don'ts to maintain your F1 visa status once you have attended that school. All right, so next we're going to jump into some really helpful resources to help you navigate the academic eligibility process. We talked about what core courses were required to become eligible. Now let's apply those to the resources that we have so that you can evaluate your transcript and determine whether or not you meet those academic requirements. The first resource that we have here is our Division I and Division II worksheets. So I would just suggest we will throw these in the chat for you as well. Be sure to save these links to your phone or to your desktop so that you can access them at a later time. This is an interactive PDF which has a breakdown for Division I and Division II, which goes over all of the academic requirements and allows you to input the course title, the grade that you earned, and the credit amount. And we will talk through how to know whether or not it's an acceptable core course and the grade and credit, specifically the credit value, which you should put into this worksheet to then calculate your overall grade point average and if you have the required credits in each subject area. Once you have the Division I and II worksheets on hand for you, the next step and resource that would be good for you to use and that we suggest is our country-specific resources. You can scan the QR code. We will also drop the link to these in the chat for you, and that will take you to the following website. This is what our international web pages look like here. It's broken down per part of the world. So for example, if you're joining us today from the UK or France or Germany, you would select Europe, and that would then take you to the list of countries within Europe, and you would select your country, which would then bring up the following example resource. So for this purposes, we use Peru as an example. This is what the country-specific PDFs look like. You'll find information on what is the typical academic calendar within that country or system. What is year 9 called? So remember, I talked about NCAA eligibility looks at the subjects that you study from years 9 and up. So it's important to reference your country-specific PDF for what is considered year 9 for NCAA purposes. So be sure to reference that, where year 9 is typically located. So for example, if your country has primary school or lower secondary school followed by upper secondary school, it will tell you where in the timeline of your country's system that you can find that. You'll also see what is considered native language for the purposes of the requirements we talked about. So that first bucket when going over core courses talked about English or native language requirements. So in order for a course to count as a native language, it must be listed as a native language in your country. So this is where you can find what native languages are considered for the specific country. Also, graduation timelines. So we're going to talk a little bit about how Division 1 has what's called a core curriculum time limitation. So you will want to reference the expected timeline for completion of your documents to know what subjects can be considered for Division 1. So using this example for Peru, Peru has a 11-year graduation timeline. That means that we would be looking at the subjects completed in years 9, 10, and 11 towards NCAA initial eligibility for Division 1. Division 2 rules say that we can consider all core courses completed prior to full-time collegiate enrollment. So if there were any delays in graduation, those delayed years could potentially be considered for Division 2 purposes only. But this is where you can find the expected timelines. Some countries have multiple timelines that depend on the type of diploma or proof of graduation that you're earning. This is where you would find that additional information. Let's talk about Canada for just a minute, our friends to the north. So core courses work just slightly differently for the Canadian provinces, but I did want to take a moment to just highlight that simply because Canada sends the largest number of international student athletes to the US for NCAA collegiate eligibility each year. So if you're joining us on today's webinar for Canada, you would go to the country-specific resources, click on North America, click on Canada, then click on your particular province or territory, and that's where you will find a PDF similar to the one example that we have here for British Columbia. All approved core courses are in the Canadian PDFs. So for example, if you're from British Columbia, which is the example here on the slide, every core course that can be considered is listed in your country PDF. And for all others joining us today outside of Canada, that's where you'll want to listen to the core curriculum course title resource that we're going to go over. But for Canadians, be sure just to reference your country specific PDF for whether or not the courses are approved. A few reminders before we jump into that course title resource is just a reminder, as I said a few moments ago, only courses taken in years 9 and up can be used towards NCAA initial eligibility. Be sure to reference the country-specific resource for what year 9 is in each country. And then, as I mentioned, that Division 1 core curriculum time limitation. So depending on what the timeline is in your country, some countries are 11-year systems, some are 12, some are 13, some are 14. Be sure to review the country PDF and then what diploma type you are earning to determine the core curriculum time limitation for you for Division 1, which determines which years of courses we can use in the eligibility process. So the next resource that we're going to take a deep dive into is our course title usage guide. Go ahead and scan that QR code if you have your smartphone out, or click on the link in the chat, and this will give you a full overview and guide of how we determine whether a course title on your transcript would be considered an NCAA approved core course for an international student. So once you've scanned that QR code or clicked on the link in the chat, this is the resource that should pop up for you, which goes over the policies for us using those different course titles and how to navigate whether or not a course title is an NCAA approved title. A few basic level reminders. Again, this is just a basic level overview. The resource does go into further detail for you to review things such as duplicative courses. So if we have anyone joining our webinar today or watching this that maybe repeated a year of secondary school, so if you took year 9 and then had to repeat year 9 and then went on to year 10, please be sure to take a moment to review the duplicative rules that are in that. We will not be going over that in detail today. This is a high-level basic overview of the resource. So step 1 is to check your country-specific PDF for the approved denied courses. 2 is to then check the denied subject words chart, which we'll be going over, then check the approved list. If it passes through those 3 steps, then the course could possibly be used as a core course towards your NCAA initial eligibility requirements. If it does not pass, then the course cannot be used. So now let's go through an example. So for the purposes of this example, we're going to use the country of France in the example course title, Economics. So step 1, A and B, would tell you to first take a look at the country-specific PDF under the important information section to see if the title in question that we're looking at is listed on the approved or the denied list. So we were using the example of economics. You'll see a screenshot there below of what the approved information looks like in the important information section. So the only 2 approved courses that are country specific to France are scientific education that's completed in years 11 or 12, or SVT for science vitae or earth science. So economics is not listed there. So we did step 1A, which is to look if they were on the approved list for the country. So then we would go on to step 1B, which would be to check for any denied courses in the important information of the France PDF. There were no denied courses listed for France. So we now move on to the next step. So step 2 says to check the course title, denied subject, and word chart. So that would be under A1 and A2. So we're using the course title, again, economics, using the course title guide to run this subject through there. You'll see things like administration, applications, applied, basic, begin, essentials, etc. So you do not see economics there, which means it passes through that first chart, and we can then move down to the second chart listed under item 2. One thing that's important to note, if this course had been called basic economics or beginner economics, then that means that that course title would hit on that chart and it cannot be used. But because none of those leveling words such as basic or beginner or essentials appears in the course title that we're running with today, which is economics, we can then move on to the next chart. So in the next chart, you'll see subjects or titles listed, which are considered to not be core courses. Things such as behavior, art, enterprise, ethics, music, media, sport, teaching, training, etc. So one of the subjects that you see on there is home economics. So if the title is home economics, we cannot use it. But again, we are working with the title economics, which means it passes through that second denied chart there. You'll also see on this chart certain words are underlined. And so those are the words in which, for example, workshop, you see part of the word workshop underlined. Those are what we call root words. So work is underlined as part of workshop. If we were to see the word work in a course title, that means we cannot use it. So now that the course, economics, has passed through the first 3 sections, we then go on to the approved chart within the course title resource. So you'll see that this is broken down by English, science, social science, mathematics, as well as other. So within this chart, we would search for the word economics. You'll see that listed under the social science title, economics. So because it is on this chart and there were no other words in the course title that prevented us from using it on the past step, that means that this course can be considered towards NCAA eligibility. As I mentioned on the last slide, root words within things. So the title English appears on the approved list here. You will see ENG underlined. If we saw a transcript that said ENG 9, that means that we could count that course as English 9. So if the root of the word is there or the full title, both of those can be considered. Another example of that would be biology. If we see bio on a transcript for years 9 and up, then the course would be considered a core area because the root of biology exists. Same thing for chemistry versus chem, civics versus civ. If those abbreviations appear on a transcript, that would still fall with under there. So that's what the underlining that you see in words in this resource mean. So what's next after that? Just a few reminders of things to be aware of. As I mentioned, that we won't go into detail today. One is to check the step-by-steps for duplicative coursework analysis on the resource that we provided you there. And then what happens if the course is not on the approved list or the denied list? What's the next step? So if it does not appear on the denied list and also does not appear on the approved list, which is pretty rare, by default, that course title cannot be used. You're welcome to reach out to our customer service team, and we'll have their contact information at the end of this presentation to inquire about that specific course title and if they feel it may fall into a core course area, and next steps to have your school submit the information on that course. Okay, so now that we have navigated how to determine if a subject or a course on your transcript is a core course, the next step is to figure out how much credit that course is worth. So if you scan the QR code here, it will take you to our crediting resource. We're also going to put the link to this resource in the chat for today's webinar, so you can click on it there. Step 1 in that resource, again, tells you check your country-specific PDF to see if there is a country-specific crediting policy. So for example, we used the course title Economics. Oftentimes, France uses a country-specific crediting policy called coefficients. We are seeing in some years that they're going away from using coefficients, but if coefficients are present on the transcript, which typically range from a 1 coefficient or higher, then that country-specific crediting policy would be noted in that country PDF. So you'll see here on the screen how those coefficients translate into US credits. So if we had an economics course with a coefficient value of 3 for the year and the course was passed, then that economics course would be worth 0.75 credits. Other notable country-specific policies that you can find are Brazil, Australia, South America. There's several different ones, and you can see those noted within the country-specific PDFs, as well as on the resource that we're going over for crediting. They note countries that use coefficients, for example. Okay, so once we've checked the country-specific PDF to determine if there is a country-specific crediting policy, what comes next? So if there's no country-specific policy, or if the policy does not align with the transcript, so for example, if we had a transcript from France and there were no coefficients listed on the transcript, or if we had a country that did not have any credits, such as Germany, we would then use this standard crediting policy. And that standard crediting policy says courses in the subject of English, native language, and mathematics are worth a credit value of 1 for the school year. So an English 9 course taken for the full academic year would be worth 1 credit for that academic year. Courses in the subject of natural or physical science, social sciences, or that other bucket, which are additional core courses, are worth a credit value of 0.5 credits for the year. And again, the resource will help give you the breakdown. For example, if your school issues transcripts in semesters, so if you have English 9 in semester 1 and English 9 in semester 2, each of those grades would get a half a credit per semester, which would still total 1 full credit for the year. So you can enter on those Division 1 and 2 worksheets each course on there. So English 9 semester 1 for a half a credit, English 9 semester 2 for a half a credit in the grade that you received in each of those semesters. So for more information and more coverage of all of this, please take a look at our additional resources. Be sure to subscribe to our international newsletter. We send out great reminders and resources as they're continuing to develop and change. We have more country specific PDFs. So as those get updated, will be in the international newsletter. Our guide to international academic standards, which goes over 176 different countries of those individual PDFs. Our international initial eligibility flyer, which we covered today, that course title usage guide and that crediting guide are both there for you to click on the links to. And be sure to register on our website at eligibilitycenter.org. And follow us on social media. We have a really great social media team who's always putting out reminders and resources via all of our social media channels. We all know we're on our phones scrolling way more than we should be, so why not get those reminders right in front of you? So follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We'll also put the links to these in the chat. If we have any transfer students or anyone on the webinar today joining us who helps transfer students, we have a really great 2-year and 4-year transfer guide that can help you go over transfer rules and options and even potential consequences before choosing to transfer. Please note that all international students attending a university who wish to transfer to an NCAA school would be considered a 4-4 transfer, so you should use that guide for 4-year transfers. The 2-year transfer guide would be for any international student that's maybe attending a junior college, a 2-year school in the United States and looking to transfer to an NCAA school. That's where that guide would be used. And for more information on transferring, be sure to visit our website on.ncaa.com/transfer. We'll also put that link in the chat for you. Okay, at this time, we're going to open it up for questions. We would love for you to take a short survey to tell us how we did today. But with that, if you could put your questions into the Q&A section of this webinar, then we'll help you answer any questions that you have today. As a reminder, please be sure to include your email address. Any questions that we don't get to with either our supportive staff answering in the chat or me answering live today, we will follow up with you. Just a reminder that your cameras and mics are muted so that we do ask that you drop those questions into the Q&A section. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what questions we have in the chat today. So one question I've seen asked a few times is, how do I submit my academic records to be determined if I'm eligible? So the first step in that is to view the link, which we'll drop again into the chat, to our document submission page, which goes over how to submit documents. But a few important reminders that I'd like to point out in that document submission process is, 1, those documents must come directly from your school or the issuing body. We would suggest that the school email those from a school email address. So that email address can be found again in the link to the information, which is ec-processing@ncaa.org. Be sure that the school includes your NCAA ID number in the subject line of the email. You do need to be registered with the NCAA before your school submits your documents so that we have those tied to your account and we can tag those to your account. Speaking of document submission, one of the other questions I see here in the chat is how long does it take for those documents to appear on my account? If your school emails those, it's typically roughly 2 business days for those to appear on your NCAA account. And how you will know that they're received is that you will see the task that's open for international documents to be submitted. You will see that task close. That's how you know that the transcripts were received, because at this time you do not have the ability to view the documents on your account, just that they have been received. Another question that we have here is how will I know for sure what core courses count towards my eligibility? The best way, aside from all of the tips and resources that we provided you today, is to 1, register with the NCAA Eligibility Center for that academic and amateurism certification account. 2, have all of your academic records as well as line-by-line English translations submitted to the NCAA Eligibility Center. And then 3, make sure that you're working with an NCAA member school. Give them your 10-digit NCAA ID number so that they can activate you to what's called an institutional request list, or an IRL. You must be on an NCAA Division 1 or 2 school's IRL in order to have an academic evaluation. But once you're registered, we have all of your academic records, and you're being actively recruited by an NCAA school, then we will do an evaluation of your records, which inputs the course titles, the grades, and the credits that will count towards NCAA eligibility into your NCAA account for you to view when you log in. Also, if anything is missing when we go to attempt that evaluation, a task will be assigned in your account, which prompts an email to you letting you know that you have action that you need to take in your NCAA account. So I cannot stress enough the importance of monitoring the email address of the account. So if you have registered with your personal email address, be sure it's an email that you check regularly, because that is how we will communicate with you that there's information missing in your NCAA account. For those of us joining today, be sure to also scan the QR code. We'll put a link in the chat to our guide to the International Academic Standards for Athletic Eligibility. Again, it goes over all the resources that we covered today, as well as country-specific PDFs for nearly 180 different countries or educational systems around the world. If we didn't get to your questions today, please be sure to drop those into the Q&A, and we will be sure that we are either answering those live, our team's answering those live, or that our customer service team follows up with you. So if you have questions you would like answered after this, be sure to include an email address that we can contact you with. Also, scan the QR code here. We'll drop the link in the chat to our contact form that you can submit those questions directly to our customer service team, and they will follow up with you within 1 to 2 business days. You can also see for international students our email address there. Always be sure to include your name and NCAA ID number and any inquiries to them. If anyone's joining us that's a US student or Canadian student today, you can actually use our toll-free customer service number. They're available 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. Thank you again for joining us today. For those of you that registered for today's webinar, in the coming days, you will be getting an email from us with a link to the PDF of all of the slides that you see here today, with all of the links that will be able to be clicked on and hyperlinked, as well as those QR codes for you to scan. And we'll also send you a recording of today's webinar. So thank you again, everyone, for joining.